was just, living a normal life. And then one day I was driving home from work, and unfortunately another driver took the wrong exit and kind of turned around and came at my vehicle, and this was split seconds, and I lost control of my vehicle, flipped about 3 times, and landed facing the oncoming traffic.
Caitie, thank you so much for carving some time out to chat. I would imagine you're very busy. You've got a lot going on, being a published author, being involved with education, and just life in general can be quite busy. So I'm grateful and very thankful for your time.
Absolutely excited to be here and chat.
Before we kind of get more into your journey of writing and your involvement in education and that sort of thing, I'd like to go back to where it began. I'm always very interested in people's faith journey. So I'm curious to know for yourself, are you a convert, a revert, or are you a cradle Catholic? Where do you fall in that spectrum, as it were?
Yeah, I guess I would say cradle Catholic. So I was born and raised Catholic and never left it fully, but definitely it ebbed and flowed over the years. So my family's all Catholic for the most part, and so which is a real great gift. Was raised, got the sacraments. It was always a part of my life. We always went to mass on Sundays. But then I would say definitely end of high school into college, I still went to mass, but definitely drifted. Friends, people I dated were probably not great influences, but I mean, I went along with things. So I just say it never left, but it was just very much in the background. So it's like maybe like you go to mass, but then like that's kind of it. Versus I would say post college, I very much still cared about the faith. I felt like I got a little bit more back into it. Started going to adoration sometimes. Started praying more frequently. And then, interestingly enough, at age 24, I was in a traumatic car accident and had to learn how to rewalk again. And that whole
Oh my
journey
goodness.
is what made me very faith filled. You can imagine you kind of either go one way or the other at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely going to touch on that. But as you kind of note, that end of high school period, that seems to be a very consistent time with a lot of people I've spoken to, where not necessarily that their faith is tested. It's just this shifting from maybe hot to lukewarm to just, it kind of falls to the wayside. For yourself in that period, would you say, was it more of a dramatic thing for you, like once you entered college, or was it a slow step away? And did you stay home for school, or did you go away? Because I'm curious to know if that has an impact in that stepping away too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I would say it was a gradual. It wasn't like one day I'm like done or sick of this. I would just say almost unnoticeable, right? It just was like a slow creeping away of me getting
Mm.
probably lazier with just prayer and having dedicated involvement in things. I did sing in the Newman choir in college, so I guess that was kind of my touching
Your anchor.
kind of, yeah, exactly. But again, singing only does so much. But I went to a local college, so Bradley University, so it is a 4 year, but it was in my hometown. I did do a mix of living on campus and at home over the 4 years. So probably having my family nearby definitely helped me to, from totally, maybe falling off the wagon. But, living on campus, being around people that really did not care about their faith at all. A lot of them actually were raised Catholic or Christian. But it's just a crazy time. And so I think their influence, but my family, it was kind of a tug of war of like, I want to
Hmm.
have faith, but like how and like how does this all work, I guess.
Yeah, and you that's interesting that you bounce in between, because I actually don't really hear that too often. Most people I know who've gone to school, it's just like, well, I've gone away and I've done the 4 years, or even if it was a local school, they just went away and they went away, or if they were home, they were home. Yours was 4 years. Out of the 4 years, like, what was the breakup? Like, was it two at home, two away? Was it your first 2 years? Like, how did that work? I'm curious because I've it as you kind of speak on it, it seems like being away really helped you drift away. So I'm just curious to know that breakup of between home and on campus.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I moved on campus freshman year, went in the dorms, got the roommate situation, and so that had a lot of pros and cons. And then I ended
Yes.
up moving back home sophomore year, and then I moved back on campus junior year into a house with a couple other girls, and then moved back home senior year. So I kind of flip-flopped every other year, I guess, with my living arrangements. And so I was kind of random. Nobody else did that, but it was a main part was to save money and then but also wanting to be with friends. And so that was part of the reason as well.
I see. I see. Do you have siblings by any chance?
I do have one brother. He is 3 years younger than me, so he was in high school at the time I was in college.
Oh, okay. And I'm sure even to this day, he probably doesn't admit how happy he was when you came home. I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, he loved it. He'll be like, "No, definitely not," but he did.
Yeah, yeah. You know, us older siblings, we definitely know. We
Yes,
definitely know.
exactly.
And being part of the Newman Choir, that's really that's awesome. It's another consistent thing I found. You know, we talk about the three transcendentals within Catholicism: truth, goodness, and beauty, and every person kind of anchors onto one, and it seems like maybe the beauty was yours, like the beauty of the choir and the singing, kind of might have maintained that for you. Do you think that played a role?
I agree. Yes, I think because I, for whatever reason, yeah, was drawn to that. I've always been a dancer, and so just love music, musicals, singing, dancing. That was all kind of my jam, and so I think to be able to connect with God through, and we sang really pretty songs. Also like very heartfelt ones, even like Matt Mayer as well. And
Mm.
so I think I was able to connect with the music, and it was so beautiful that I do think that it kind of kept drawing me towards the Lord, and He kind of used that to not keep me from like falling totally overboard. But it was a real
Mm.
challenge of like, I want to be accepted by these people. You know, a serious boyfriend, best friends, and you know, they had checked it, but then I'm trying to stay on the wagon, but I'm trying to be accepted, and it was difficult. It was not easy, and I kept trying to walk the line, and it was
Mm.
not an easy feat to do.
I can't even imagine. My journey, I'm very much a revert within the last 5 years.
Oh wow.
Actually, I didn't even know I was Catholic until I my now wife got me to do RCIA. Like it was very important to her, so I was like, ah, sure, I'll check this thing out, and then lit me a fire. But it was when that's when I actually found out I was baptized Catholic. So it just kind of shows.
Wow.
Yeah. We were not involved at all, and like if we did go to church, it was like the neighbors who were like a non-denominational sort of thing, and I declared I wasn't going to church anymore at like 13. Like so, big gaps, big gaps. So when you
Yeah.
you you talk about like here when I hear about these anchors and just kind of like to walk that, I can't even imagine that struggle because like I just cannonballed on the other side. Not saying
Yeah.
that's good. Like whoever's watching this, that is not ideal. It's just my particular journey. So I have great admiration for those who grew up in it and really struggled with the faith. It's I think often people think, oh, it's all you Christians, it's just easy street, and it's like
Yes. Not exactly.
it's like quite the opposite. It's a lot easier to just do whatever you want than trying to
It
like
is.
adhere to certain principles. You mentioned that accident at 24. Do you mind if we kind of dive into that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually what inspired my very first book that I wrote. But yeah, I was a normal 24-year-old. I was working a job at a marketing agency. I worked
Hmm.
out probably like 6 days a week, was just, living a normal life. And then one day I was driving home from work, and Unfortunately, another driver took the wrong exit and kind of turned around and came at my vehicle. And this was split seconds. And I lost control of my vehicle, flipped about 3 times, and landed facing the oncoming traffic. And so that was a terrifying, few moments of feeling like I was going to die. And then being taken to the hospital, assessed for my injuries, was in the hospital for 11 days, had surgery, and then it took a whole year to walk again, and then a second full year for total recovery.
Total recovery. When you were in the hospital, what was the extent to your injuries? Because when we hear people having to rewalk, was it like major damage to your? Again, if we go too far, please let me know, because
Yeah,
I I
absolutely.
can't imagine what it would be like to experience that. Was it femur? Was it back? Was it neurological? Like where if you're okay,
Yeah,
like
for
giving to the
sure.
extent so people know how hard it was to walk those next 2 years, like to go across that path.
Yeah, so my collarbone, my elbow, my knee in 4 places, ACL, PCL, um, meniscus, and tibial plateau in the knee, and then both sides of my right ankle, and then a finger. And so basically, multiple broken bones down the left side of my body, and then
Hmm.
also had contused lungs. So that just means bruises on your lungs. So had some difficulty
Yeah.
breathing for a little bit. Um, Luckily that stabilized, but basically I was so weakened, because one, I had to wait for my bones to set, and then from being bedridden, it was so difficult to go from the wheelchair to crutches to braces to nothing. And that was just a brutal physical therapy journey of a lot of pain, a lot of tears. Basically, thank God I didn't have any, head injury or spinal cord injury. That was a
Hmm.
blessing, but it was just, so it was all things that could heal. However, I still live with knee pain today, and
Mm.
so still have to baby it a little bit. But considering what could have
Yeah.
happened, I'm well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very. That's miraculous. I can't even imagine to the extent, because it's yeah. I don't think people maybe realize the level of atrophy that can happen when you have to be
Yes.
still and wait for everything to set, and actually what it takes to rebuild muscle. Like I think we take that for granted until then you like somebody might break an arm or break a leg, but like to have all of that and then to bounce back, that's pretty amazing. It's and you said during that time your faith grew. Can you speak on that? Because it just to now that I hear to the extent, you sound very much like Saint Ignatius.
Well, I'm not that close yet, but I am
Not
one.
not yeah.
Yeah.
Fair, fair. Maybe
um
not starting an order, but like that time of reflection being forced upon you because of the
That's
injury.
true. That's true. Yeah. So
Mm,
I would say in the beginning, I was very much in desolation. So I was very much like a why
mm,
me? I'm like, I go to mass. Like I, was praying every day at that point. Went to adoration periodically, and I had joined a Bible study. Like I'm like trying to like be faith filled, and like I'm trying to treat people well, and I'm trying to do the right things in life. And I was like, why me? Like this, not that this should happen to anybody, but I'm like, if it's going to, it shouldn't be me. And so I had to get from that mindset. But I still prayed very like small prayers, like a Hail Mary or a Jesus help me or Jesus, I trust in you. So I would still try to do like quick prayers. But then it just was so dry for, I mean, a couple of years during that time with all that pain. I mean, I felt very little consolation during that time period. I didn't understand why God allowed this to happen. I realized, He didn't cause it, but He permitted it for some good. And it was very difficult to understand until actually a few years had went by. And that's really where I feel like my faith grew once I could look back and reflect.
oh, that's interesting. That one would almost think that uh, I guess that the outside view is like, oh, somebody must, been super chipper the entire time, and their walk with God. But that I really appreciate the forthrightness, because I think we sometimes forget that as part of our faith, we're given crosses, a variety of them, and we're called to carry them joyfully if possible, but carry them nonetheless. So that's interesting that you were able. It was really your look back that was your turning point. Um, yeah, you said, how often were you doing adoration, and was that kind of like a key part of your, I don't know if it would be like your spiritual recovery or your spiritual anchor, like,
I
but
agree.
how big of a role did that play?
Yeah, I would say ahead of the accident, I was going every so often, so maybe every few weeks or so. And then when I was super bad, actually, Deacon Roger and his wife brought me communion each week before I was good enough to go back to Mass because I just felt so weak. So they brought me communion each week. And then my parish priest did First Friday visits. So they brought me the Eucharist as well for First Fridays. So those like when they all three of them came, like those were like moments of like I just felt like peace and consolation. I like didn't want them to leave. I was like, don't leave. Like, and they're like, we gotta go. So I would say those were definitely anchor pieces. When I got strong enough to go back to mass, that certainly helped. And then when I was able to go back to adoration, my mom started taking me until eventually I was good enough. Again, it was sporadically. I don't remember at what point exactly I started going weekly, and it was at that point that I feel like it just and I was a couple years past accident at that point, but then it just skyrocketed of just like peace and like just feeling like the Lord had purpose for it, even though I still didn't know what that purpose was at the time. But I'm like, there's purpose, there's a story, I'm supposed to help people, I'm my suffering is doing some sort of good. And so even though I didn't fully get the ramifications of it, I felt this sense of peace through that experience.
And how how would you say that you've been called to help people?
Yeah, I would say through my writing. And so, I'm just a girl from, a somewhat smaller community, Peoria, Illinois. And so, I don't have a big name or big connections or anything like that, not connected to, New York Times or anything. But just from, I feel like the Lord has blessed my writing and helping me to write two books now. The first one, Stepping Up, is all about my car accident and how I learned how to rewalk, but then how my faith grew throughout that whole journey. And I write in real time and then also do reflection on the
Hmm.
accident as well. And it's been such a joy to see people that like I barely knew or like was a friend of a friend that read it and they're like, hey, I'm going through a divorce. This book gave me hope. Hey, I lost my job. This book gave me hope. So not necessarily car accidents, although some people have read it that have been in a car accident, but just to be able to
Hmm.
help people. And then I just recently wrote my children's book as well, and so to see that that's helping kids with grief, it's just been a joy. Like I love writing, I love designing. It's my favorite thing to do, and so like just to be able to like write about God and try to have hopeful content for people to consume. I feel like the Lord is pushing me in that direction.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I hadn't had a chance to read your first one, but I'm definitely going to go back to do so. But I have had the pleasure of, reading I Have a Friend in Heaven, and it was uh, it, wonderfully sweet. I expressed to you, before we started recording, that my wife read it and loved it, and she was just like, my heart, and well, we have two dogs also, so that
Yes.
it really struck a chord with us. But it's such a good thing, because living, I live in Canada, you live in America. For the most part, we're really separated from death, and we're
Mhm.
really live quaint existences, living in these countries, and we're not faced with these sort of things too often. And for kids, uh, when that's thrust upon them for the first time, that can be a lot. So I think you've really come up with a beautiful gift for them to be able to walk through that, because really the first death they'll likely deal with is a pet, and that could be hard for them. So that's
It
yeah, it
is.
was really really sweet. It was really sweet.
Thank you. That's
um
that's so great to hear. Yeah, I'm hoping that it can help kids, just because, what do you say to them when they lose somebody? And to your point, it could be applied to, hopefully not, but if they had to lose a family member or a friend, this
mhm.
pet is a way easier way to introduce this concept in a friendly and hope-filled way. It's not that you've lost somebody, you've just gained a friend in heaven is the takeaway. And so, yeah, I'm really hoping that it can help kids, and I've gotten really great reviews so far from a few kiddos that I've shown it to, and they're like, "Oh, we love this dog." So, I'm very hopeful.
Yeah, and what I really love and appreciate and respect about is you wrote it and you illustrated it,
Mhm.
and I really have to take my hat off to you, because it's quite common to come across people who are like, I should write a book, or I should do this, or I should do that, and they don't do the thing. They don't
Mhm.
do the thing. And to feel that pull, like to go through what you went through and know that, okay, I've been gifted these talents, like how can I dedicate them to the Lord? Like, even to have that conversation, not everybody's having that. So the fact that you were able to do that, I great admiration for that. What was the process like for you? I'm sorry, as I'm looking down, I'm just re-looking at the book, like it's just so sweet. What was the process like for you in terms for the nuts and bolts of like writing it out, designing it, coming up with the illustrations? Do you mind if we kind of like get in,
Yeah.
step away maybe from the theology and get into the nitty gritty of the tech side of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I loved it. Basically, a year ago, I had to say goodbye to my dog Christmas, and I had her for 13 years. And so I make myself a little younger in the book, but I was 13 when I got her, and then lost her last year, when I was 28, 29 now. And so basically, about I don't know, a few days later, after she had stopped breathing, we took her in the vet. There was something they could do. So, anyways, had to say goodbye. And I wrote this little poem just to like help myself kind of with grieving the loss of her, of just trying to process like, I'm not going to see her again. And she was just like this sweet collie. And anyways, I kind of finished growing up with her. So it was, anyway, she's a special dog. So I wrote this poem. I didn't plan on really doing anything with it, just kind of let it sit for months. And then kind of the idea came probably in the fall when I was just like kind of praying and thinking about things and like, oh, what should I be working on or what should I do? And I'm like, oh, yeah, like I remember I wrote that poem. Like maybe it would work for a kid's book. And then I'm like, well, maybe I could try illustrating it. I'm like, I've never done it, but let's see if I can. And so I did learn some basic design skills in my master's program at Northwestern. So I did have a little bit of a background, but I had never like tangibly done it professionally, I guess. And so I was like, all right, let's give it a shot. So that took my little poem I wrote in like 30 minutes or something, but like the actual illustrations, I had several iterations. The themes were all pretty much set. I kind of knew I wanted, like a little farm scene and a bedroom and heaven. And so, but I did change it over time, probably a few months. And then trying to get it to the specifications for Amazon, I had to like change things more, and then landed on it. And so, yeah, I released it at the end of February. And yeah, it's been so fun to see it come to life.
Yeah, that's amazing. Just to be able to be a true auteur, in the fact you're taking on all these different facets and stepping into something that you hadn't done before. I would have assumed that you had a history of illustration and that sort of thing. So the fact that you really just stepped out in faith in order to do that. That's pretty remarkable. That's pretty remarkable. Yeah, I saw that you did your master's at Northwestern, and when I see design, I'm thinking design thinking and I'm thinking UX and that sort of stuff. Is that more what it is versus
Yes.
like the actual illustration?
Exactly, yes. So it was kind of combining, it was called information design and strategy. And so it kind of combined like writing, design, and analytics together. So yeah, it was more like user interface design, social media, and then some database courses, design, information architecture. So how you lay out a website. So more of that approach versus like illustrations. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I kind of took
Mm-hmm.
those concepts and applied it, but it was not, I did not take like a illustration class or anything like that.
Oh, very honestly, truly, truly inspiring. Just then the fact that you took time to reapply your skills in a different sort of way, and I really hearing that. Honestly, that's the whole point of doing the personal vocation is like to inspire people so they can see like people like yourself who are wanting to just create good and share good and maybe not sure how to do it but then just find a way. So that's amazing. That's great. And I'm happy for you that you've been able to get sorry again, I'm looking at the book again and I'm really that's great to see that there's been a positive reaction to it and that you were able to self-publish.
Yeah, that was a really unique experience. I went through a traditional publisher for my first adult book, but for this kids one,
Mhm.
I wanted to try to do it myself, mainly just to have total creative control because usually with a publisher, they're like, well, I want it to be a whatever another type of dog and a different title, and I just wanted to do like my vision. And so yeah, it was actually not that bad. I mean, it's time intensive for sure, but apart from, as long as you have the time, it was very doable to learn it. And yeah, I just think it was just trying to use my gifts in ways that can help glorify God. And yeah, to your point, it's hard to know, okay, well, like, how do I do this, or like, is this what he wants, or is this the right direction? But a lot of times, you pray, but then you just got to do something and see if it bears fruit or not. And so yeah, that's my kind of encouragement to others is like, and I didn't think, especially going back to like my college self, or even early post college, like I didn't think I would be writing two books. And so I think just being open to possibilities and like saying, Lord, like, what do you want me to do? Because I literally would have been like, you're crazy. But now I love it. And so it's
Yeah.
kind of, it's amazing what he can surprise you with if you give the time and the space for him to work.
It really falls in line. I was listening to a talk. I can't remember the name of the priest, but he had said that we should be part of what we should pray is to pray to desire what God wants for us.
Mm-hmm.
And there's great power in that simplicity, and it's like the doors that can open with that, because
Yes.
human pride, we could, well, I'll speak to my own, it's like, oh, it's got to be this way, it's got to be this way, and it's like, okay, I guess I have to go this way because
Yeah.
you are doing like the bowling bumpers to
Yeah.
steer me towards here. Yeah, that's interesting. Do you have more books in the work, or is it like, you just released this one February 2024? um are you more so working on getting this out there, or have you started back in the laboratory, as it were, for new ones?
I love that. So I'm still just promoting this children's book right now, and so
Mm.
I've done some different radio interviews and a TV interview as well. So I'm working on promotions right now. I am hopeful for more books. I don't have anything at the moment, but I several people are like, "You're gonna have another one." I was like, "Well, maybe. I probably will, but just nothing has come to light yet, and
Mhm.
so I have to wait for." That inspiration to strike me, and then when it does, like, I absolutely, like, I just dive all in. And so when that day comes, which I'm sure it will, I'll have more, but for now I'm just promoting this one.
Okay, I'm gonna, in the description for the video, I will put a link so people can go buy it. It's, yeah, make sure everybody gets a copy. If you don't have kids now, that's fine. You may know children, buy it for them, buy it for yourself. Just buy a few copies. Um, so you're, obviously you're an author. You have two books under your belt now, but you're also in education. Currently, you're a substitute or you're full time teacher.
So yeah, so I've done quite the career change. So I actually spent the
Yeah.
like 6 years in corporate America, mainly with Caterpillar and Cat Financial, doing a lot of marketing, communication type roles. And then
Hmm.
recently, this past year, in addition to my children's book, was a substitute teacher at a grade school this year. I also taught a business class at Bradley University for juniors. And then I was a design teaching assistant for my old program at Northwestern. So literally taught master's, college, and kids all at once.
That is quite the spectrum
Yeah.
to to cross all those. As you sort of navigate all these different sort of levels, how have you been able to bring your faith into it? Obviously, like your Northwestern isn't a Catholic university or anything like that, and for most people, they work in secular environments. So maybe people can be able to learn like from you, how do you bring your Catholic self into these different places and spaces?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that it's really about those one-on-one encounters. I tried to, especially like when I taught the business class, management and leadership, I really tried to incorporate the virtues because yes, it's Catholic, but everyone should be, treating people with respect. Everyone should be humble. Everyone should be, patient. And so, try to incorporate the virtues in terms of how to treat people, how I conducted my class, how I think that they should conduct themselves on their first job. And then in other roles, whether it be Northwestern or Caterpillar, I just tried to, show, be Christian, right? And how I'm responding to people. What's my tone? What's my attitude? How am I speaking to others? And then when people do ask me, because I'm always like, oh gosh, are people going to ask me about my faith? And they always do. It's like they always find out. And I'm like, okay, here we go. Like, I hope I have the right answers for these people. And so I try to share with them why I am still Catholic and why I care about my faith. And so I have had a lot of one-on-one interactions, sometimes good, sometimes a little bit more hostile, but nonetheless, I always just like pray real quick. I'm like, Holy Spirit, help me. And I try to give witness to whatever they're questioning about.
What's two? I guess this is a two-parter. What's the most common question you've been asked, and what has been, I guess, the most hostile encounter, and how did you navigate that, or how did you navigate both of those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it's usually just kind of like, I guess the most hostile would be I can picture somebody at my old job that was just kind of made rude comments. They were someone that I don't know if they had a Christian faith at one point or not, but they were into crystals. Energies, meditation. And so they were very much believers in that. And that's the answer to their problems and their stress and their anxiety. And so I would get comments like, "Oh yeah, you and your little faith. Yeah, you and your little prayer. Like you and you. Like I saw you go to mass. Like I saw you walking across the street to mass." And I'm like, "Oh gosh, like we have a 30-minute lunch break. I'm sorry." I would say, I just tried to be charitable time and time again. I'm
Mm,
just like, yeah, I said like, yeah, the God, God is very important to me, and He cares about everybody, and I just would try to make comments and like I would try to say like yeah like I don't believe in inanimate rocks giving you help. I like my prayer life has really helped me and my stress, and so I would try to redirect when I could, but I did get a lot of
mm,
zingers from this particular person. And so
mm.
I just tried to be charitable, tried to redirect if there was a tie-in of like what her action was, if I could try to point her to something that would be better. And then
Hmm.
ultimately I am just like, oh gosh, God's gonna have to do more work. I don't think I can make any more impact, but I did what I could.
Hmm. Yeah, that's extremely kind. I'm very calm. I'm very chill. Like that. This is generally my demeanor. Um, but certain things I have no patience for. I'm praying to God all the time for more of it, and thankfully my wife is very diplomatic and she demonstrates that for me. But it's something when I see it, I admire it. Like in people like yourself and like my wife, I have great admiration for that because still working on that. Still working on
Not easy.
that.
I've had my moments, so
Yeah. And what's the kind of the more most common question you sort of get?
oh, right, yes. I would say a lot, especially from Protestant friends that I've had, a lot of questions about Mary is very common, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to explain, we don't worship her. Yes, we sing songs about her. That is not the same thing. Yes, we ask for her intercession. No, she's like, no, she's not God, but she is helpful. And so, trying to explain Mary to a lot of people, I would say, has been very common. Um, Gosh, what else? The Eucharist is a big one. A lot of people, even Catholics, are like, well, like, yeah, like it is, but it isn't. But like, I don't know. Like, it's like, yeah, like I believe it, but like I don't. And like trying to get across to them, like, John chapter 6 and, the Last Supper, and like really trying to explain like where this comes from. Like, it wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
some random guy in the corner came up with this. Like, this was Jesus saying this. This was Jesus demonstrating this. So I'd say the Eucharist and Mary are usually two big ones of either
Mm-hmm.
lackluster or questioning.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. That seems to be quite common. And again, I didn't know I was Catholic until RCIA. Still one of the comical highlights of my life. Uh, but the churches I did go to were Protestant, and then I was in public school. Actually, up until high school, I had to then go to Catholic school because my it was it was a better school system, like where I live. And it's funny, my 13, 14 year old me was saying these same sort of things. So when I get approached with these very same questions, uh, again, how charitable and kind you are in these answers. I don't always have that because I'm like, I feel like I'm, because in my mind's eye, I'm like, why am I speaking to 13-year-old Jermaine? Like, I thought we moved past this, but I, I get it. I get it because I've had coming up and going to like Baptist churches or Anglican church. Well, less so Anglican, but coming up in these churches and hearing these questions. Um, but yeah, can learn to be more charitable when it comes to these things. You model it very well. You model it very, very, very
Well,
well.
thank you. I
Um, yeah, and it's I there was a book I had read some time ago, and it said that we're all like billboards for the faith. That we might very well be the introduction to Catholicism to somebody.
yeah.
So you navigate and manage that really well. Um, Part of these interviews, there's a selfish bit for me because I always want to learn from people. I love talking to people because then I can learn where I can. Well, I already know where I need to improve, but when I hear people how they do it, I'm like, okay, man, let me take these notes on how to be a bit more charitable. So that's you really exhibit that really well. Um, there's one thing I wanted to know. We're going to rewind a little bit. Back to when you had kind of been back on the mend, because you had said that people were coming and bringing Eucharist to you, and your mom would bring you to adoration. Do you remember the first time back to mass, like
Yeah.
when you went on your own? Do you remember that? And could you take me back there and describe what that was like? I'm actually really curious what about that particular moment.
Yeah, that was definitely, it's interesting you point that out because that was definitely a small moment, but one that like really brought me so much joy. I think to like finally be like, yes, like I'm well enough, I'm going. And it was so defeating because the next week, it like masses were like canceled or shut down for COVID-19. And so like I went once and then couldn't go again for a long time, but didn't know that
Mm,
in the moment. I had several people come up to me and like hug me and say, we've been praying for you, like welcome back. And it was just a very warm greeting, which I feel like is not necessarily the most typical. Like I happen to know a lot of people at that mass, and I mean sometimes I do, but not to that volume. It was kind of interesting, but they were just very gracious. And then I think just being able to finally like go in person, like I just had like a wash of like peace and like hope and joy. Like I just felt like, okay, yeah, it's like I'm back home and like I'm okay and like this is gonna work out somehow. I just felt like that spiritual kind of lift, if you will, from just kind of, the struggle. I felt like I was kind of transported out of that for that hour, and just to be able to like receive the Eucharist myself. um I don't remember what the homily was or anything, but I just remember how I felt, and I just felt
mm,
so like full, being able to go back to mass myself.
mm. That's wonderful. That's yeah. That gave me like that goosebumps just to that feeling of completion and wholeness and um, being very different from what you were, where you said you were kind of like in and out,
Yeah.
in university, like even exhibited to the point of like on campus, off campus, on campus,
Yeah.
off campus, and like they're not hot cold, and then to actually to experience that what it sounds like just sheer joy, that sheer joy and that sheer love of Christ as
It
you
really was. And like
willingly do it.
I remember, I won't mention who they are, but there was somebody I know, and I remember they were like kind of like sarcastic and were like, "Oh, how exciting you get to go back to mass." And I was like, it is exciting. Like I'm like, you don't understand. Like I'm like, this is literally, joyous, because I'm like, I'm well enough to like receive the Eucharist. And I think really being on fire at that point, to your point of just being kind of half in, half out, lackluster, like trying, then kind of falling. I was like the Lord's like spared my life, and he is helping me get better, and like now I get to be like in person with him. And I think it's like I felt like I had new vision at that point. It was literally like the spiritual blindness was finally gone, and I could like see reality almost. But I feel like the challenge of being since that point is like a lot of people around me are kind of the lackluster Catholics, whether it's family or friends, or lackluster Christian. Of just like, yeah, I believe in God, like he created us, but like I'm still gonna do what I want to do. And like it's been a challenge to try to witness to them, because they really don't understand where I'm coming from. They're like, "Who are you?"
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I totally get that, and it's very difficult to be a prophet in one's own land,
Yeah,
and particularly if they've seen who you are versus who you were versus who you are. That can probably be a bit tricky, but it's great that you continue to just I come from a sport background. I played basketball, and it's like you're doing the reps, you're doing the thing. You
yeah,
continue to go to mass, you continue to go to adoration, you continue, and it's not you're not doing it just to like tick a box. It's like
right.
you want to be there.
Mhm.
So that's yeah, that's so very important to just be that beacon for them because eventually, maybe you continue to pray for them. Maybe it's like, hey, maybe can I come with you this week, or that sort of thing. So you never know. You never
It's
know.
true. You never know what the Lord's up to and what he can use.
Precisely. Like my wife and I got married in February, and neither our families are Catholic, or at very least not practicing. And we were fortunate enough to have like a boys' choir at the mass, and for a lot of them, they felt something.
Yeah,
Like nobody's suddenly like kicking down the doors to go to mass, but I get. I had one particular cousin really become curious, and she's come to mass a couple times, and like she's still sort of exploring. Um, but yeah, just serving as a witness in whatever shape or form to continue to show truth, goodness, and beauty. We just, I guess we're just called to do that, and that's great. You continue to do so.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and
Um,
you as well. I think those little small things, even when you're not, like you said, like, you were planning your wedding mass, and that like the Lord just used that even for somebody else, even though they just think they're coming to a wedding, and the Lord's like, I have something else for you, but it'll take a few years.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Plant that sort of seed. Yeah, and yeah, you're so very right about that. That might take a few years, because I look at my conversion. It didn't necessarily begin with my wife asking me to go speak to a priest and explore RCIA for knowing. In grad school, I was part of the students union, and I got to meet a bunch of Catholics in the students group. And there's a couple who come to mind who are always so gracious and welcoming. It's like, yeah, come on in, like let's chat. Or even going back to elementary or high school, my teacher, Miss Plasowicz, was the most patient woman on earth, because I was uh, yeah, obnoxious, how a teenage boy can be obnoxious, and like still pouring into me. So it took some time, but it definitely got there. So yeah, as you'll be serving as that bridge for these people who they're in that temperature of they're not hot. What was that scripture in Revelation? It's like, you're not hot, you're not cold, therefore I spit you out of my mouth, or something
Yeah,
like that. Yeah. So it's like you continue to witness till they can turn up that temperature.
that's the
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, do you have any advice, wisdom that you could offer for others who are kind of in that space? They're faithful, but they're not quite sure how to live out their faith. Is there any parting words that you could leave them with, from your own experience, your own wisdom?
Yeah, I would say definitely lean on the sacraments, lean on confession. I know we've already touched about the Eucharist and adoration. Pray the rosary. That's helped me greatly. I think the more you can lean into your prayer life and like actively, not just like God help me, amen, but like literally, like if you can read scripture, if you could go to adoration, you could pray a rosary, and like obviously you don't need to do all of it at once, right? Pick something that maybe most speaks to you first, and then like just be consistent with that over time, and then also be sure you're going to confession to wipe away just like your sins, and to also have like more of a clarity in hearing the Lord's like voice and what he wants for your life. And then just start small, like start with just how you're treating people, watching your words. Just seeing like maybe you really don't feel like helping someone, answer a technology question. That would be me, because I'm always asked for technology help by like older people in my family or older coworkers, and I'm like, "Oh, here we go." And like trying to like bite that feeling of like not wanting to help but like be cheerful and help anyways, right? That is a way of doing the Lord's will in a small way. So I think looking at how you can do little mini sacrifices like that when you don't feel like doing something, pray, and then just look for those opportunities, because they do present themselves every single day, with just small ways, and then obviously in the big ways, the Lord will reveal
Mm.
that to you as well. So I just say, pray, 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 and from that, everything else will come.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. And particularly that notion of just picking something that I did a similar thing, and it really helped me. And just rehearing that reminds me of its importance. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for all your time. This was amazing, and I'm going to go back and get your first book, and I feel that there's a lot I will be able to learn and apply to my life. So I appreciate your time and the fact that you use your gifts and share your faith with us all.
Thank you so much. So grateful for the opportunity. I enjoyed today.